Amen. You can have a seat. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to start off with a question tonight. Hope you studied. How many of you have ever been on Instagram? Anybody been on Instagram here? Okay, so I read this one article about Instagram. Listen to what this says. It's literally keeping up with the Joneses. The classic phrase goes something like this: your neighbors are the Joneses, and because you live next to them, you get sporadic glimpses into their lives. The Joneses are doing a bit better than you financially, so you try to adjust your lifestyle to keep up with how they live. Ergo, the phrase, keeping up with the Joneses. Instagram is like being able to have a glimpse into hundreds, if even thousands, of our neighbors' lives. But on a more personal scale, of course, these are people who you associate with, friends and family, and the other people, celebrities, that you like or admire. Their appearances on Instagram aren't their actual lives, though. I'm sorry to burst your bubble. On the average person's Instagram account, what do you see? You definitely don't see them doing any of this. Them sitting at home exhausted watching TV before bed. Them waking up early, mad and frustrated because they don't want to go to work. Them paying bills, worrying about their credit card debts. Them yelling at their kids because they got suspended from school again. But you will see stuff like this, though. Pictures of food and drink that always look way better than whatever you're consuming. Have you guys ever seen a picture of a Big Mac on a billboard? Has anyone here ever gotten a Big Mac that looks like that picture? No, my Big Macs are like smashed and, it's like falling over and no, never, right? You see stuff like pictures of gorgeous looking accessories or stunning outfits of the day. Pictures of people doing fun things, parties, concerts, going out, whatever. Basically, you'll notice the majority of pictures on Instagram are people or products looking at their best. When we're browsing Instagram, though, we're usually not at our best at all. We're playing around on our phones, at home on the couch, bored with life, or needing a distraction. We're doing these ordinary things, and once we see the good stuff, we want to be doing that too. After all, after we look at all of that, we discover there is no win in comparison. There's no win in comparison. Our new series is called You're Not the Boss of Me, right? And I looked at it like this container of Skittles, okay? This is Instagram right here. See this right here? Instagram. I know you want some of these, but you can't. Remember? We had that discussion. Remember that, Tara? I'm just kidding. Okay. Anyway, so here, okay, so this is our life on Instagram. Here, the problem is you don't see what's inside. You don't see the reality of what this is covering up. And so last week we looked at, oh, way to go. Thanks, Robin. Wow. Wow, that was really good, Robin. Good job. All right, so this week we're going to look at another thing that's on the inside of us that screams to be the boss of us. All right, last week it was called guilt and shame. This week it's another thing that is pervasive inside of us, and it's called envy. Envy. All right? So what are we going to do? What are we going to do with this? This whole thing, envy. There's a feeling like if you define envy, maybe I'll just throw that out there, okay? Give me a definition for envy. Raise your hand. I'll call on you, okay? I have to say that because if I don't, Randy, he'll just be all over. Okay, so anyway, so I'm just gonna say, okay, so give me a definition for envy. What is that? Okay, coveting your neighbor's sheep. That is very churchy. Thank you. Wow, that was really nice and churchy. Okay, somebody else that might not want to be as churchy. No. What's that? What do you think, Nate? NASCAR drivers are envious of other NASCAR drivers? Okay, got it. Okay, all right. Somebody else, yeah. Jealousy. Okay, that would be another word. Okay, so listen, this is how, the dictionary, he defines it. A feeling of discontent with regard to another's advantages, success, possessions, etc. The grass is always greener on the other side. Yeah, so imagine what it would be like if envy was the boss of you. Imagine if that's what became the boss of you, was envy. Okay? We're going to look at a place. Okay, the guy that we're going to look at tonight, this guy, his name is Solomon. Okay, Solomon is a really unique individual because Solomon is actually considered the wisest man that ever lived because he actually asked God to be wise, to have wisdom. And so God said, you know what? Because you didn't ask for riches, because you didn't ask for stuff, because you didn't, I am going to instill and give you godly wisdom like nobody's ever had, okay? So this guy, Solomon, is very, very wise. He wrote what's called the book of Proverbs. He wrote this other book called Ecclesiastes. We're going to be in that book tonight. But listen to what he says in Proverbs chapter 14, verse 30. He says this: a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. Wow, I think that was from God. He was like, that was his exclamation point. Okay? All right. Envy rots the bones, okay? Listen to how the New Living Translation puts this, okay? A peaceful heart leads to a healthy body. Jealousy is like cancer in the bones, all right? So I got a bunch of really cool phrases from different people. Like when I do this, I look at a lot of different things. I look at other people that have preached on it and looked at articles on it and whatever. So I'm going to say some phrases throughout the message tonight that are really good. Like there's a lot of people that are a lot smarter than I am, so I took some of theirs. But here's the first one. Listen to what this says. Envy leads me to compete with people who don't even know there's a competition. Envy leads me to compete with people who don't even know that there's a competition. They don't even know that there's this thing that there was, but you're competing with them, okay? And envy is always going to lead to one of two places every single time. It's either going to lead to arrogance or depression. Envy is always going to lead to either arrogance, look at what I have, look at how good I am, or to depression. I wish I had, I don't have, I can't have. So it's either going to lead to arrogance or depression. So let's be honest about this tonight, okay? Because we're in church, okay? So we should be honest. We're in church here. So all of us here have struggled with this in one way or another. Can we be honest with that, okay? Don't think that it's any different for a pastor, because it's not. Because I could look at, it would be very easy for me to look at other ministries out there and to become arrogant about how ours is, or depressed because it's not like somebody else's. Okay? And it's like, it's so easy to look at someone else's ministry or church and either start feeling puffed up or depressed. Okay? And then we look at other people's kids and wonder why our kids didn't turn out so well. Right? Or we look at other people's clothes. Or we look at other people's finances. Or other people's vacations. Or other people's spouses. Or other people's houses. Or other people's health. Or other people's pets. Or other people's education. Or other people's phone. Right? It's like this thing is like so ingrained on the inside of us. It is so ingrained on the inside of us. And to be honest, I don't know if it's actually something that we're going to solve. Okay, I don't know that we're going to actually solve this. But we need to learn how to manage that tension. We need to learn how do we manage this tension that we experience all the time. Okay, because remember last week when I said that these things that become the boss of us throws us off balance. It throws us off balance in how we live our life. Last week we talked about guilt and shame. And when we let that become the boss of us, it throws us off balance and it affects everything else that we do. It affects how we feel about ourselves. It affects how we feel about other people. It affects how we feel about the future. It affects how we feel about the past. Right? That's the same thing with envy. Like when we let envy become the boss of us, it throws us off balance in how we're living our life. So I want you to go to, this is, in fact, I'm actually going to do a series on the book of Ecclesiastes. It's like one of my favorite books in the whole Bible, believe it or not. I love that book. So I want you to go to the book of Ecclesiastes. It's in the Old Testament. If you need a Bible, raise your hand because we got Bibles. So you can go there. Come on. Raise your hand up. Even if you didn't use deodorant, raise it up. It's fine. And we will get you a Bible. And we're going to go to the book of Ecclesiastes. All right? It's kind of a fun word to say. And Solomon, this guy, the smartest, the wisest man that has ever lived, Solomon talks about this whole idea of envy. And he actually defines it in a very interesting way as far as what it means when we choose to let envy be the boss of us. Okay, so we're going to start in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. And we're going to actually start in verse number 5, okay? Ecclesiastes chapter 4. We're going to start in verse number 5, okay? Give you a second to find it, all right? I know. All right, so here we go. Verse 5, it says, "Fools fold their idle hands, leading them to ruin. And yet, better to have one handful with quietness than two handfuls with hard work and chasing the wind." All right, so you're like, huh? What's he saying there? Right? Okay, so we're going to say this. I looked at a couple other versions that might help you understand this better. Here's how it is in the Message. Listen to how verse 6 is put in the Message. "One handful of peaceful repose is better than two fistfuls of worried work, more spitting into the wind." Has anybody here ever spit into the wind? Has it worked out well for you? Okay. All right. How about, okay, so then I found today's English version. Listen to how this puts verse 6. It says, maybe so, but it is better to have only a little with peace of mind than be busy all the time with both hands trying to catch the wind. All right, so all of those are like mentioning this wind, right? And so let's face it. Social media is an envy factory. It's an envy factory, and as I'm on, okay, so this I don't know if this happens to you, okay, but it happens to me. As I'm on Facebook, as I'm on Instagram, there's one thing that it makes me think over and over and over and over and over again. And the one thing that I think is, oh my gosh, I suck. I mean, it does. It's like, I just suck, right? So what is Solomon talking about? When he's talking about, it's like catching the wind. So I thought, how can I give this as an example to you tonight, okay, on what this means to chase the wind, okay? So let's just imagine, I don't know how fast you guys are in this room, okay? But let's imagine it's really windy outside, right? Really windy, right? And your objective is to chase this, right? And so you get up and you start running and you start trying to find a way to chase this around. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? How are you going to find out where it is? Barb wants more of it. There you go, Barb. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So what are you going to do? How crazy is it to go? I'm going to chase this, right? It's really windy. I'm going to find out where's it going. I'm going to find out how to catch it. I'm going to do all that. Does that sound crazy to anybody here? It sounds crazy to me. All right, and I'm glad you were holding on to your hair because I didn't want. I was like, oh boy, we almost lost something there. Okay. I know, it was like crazy. Yeah, so okay, good, because it's obvious. All right, so we need to find ways in our life, we need to find ways to get rid of some of these influences in our lives that create this envy. Okay? We need to find some ways to do that, okay? Go to verse number 7 of Ecclesiastes. Listen to what this says. I observed yet another example of something that is meaningless under the sun. The whole book of Ecclesiastes, he talks about these things that we chase after and we think are important and they're just meaningless. All right? He says, verse 8, this is the case of a man who is all alone without a child or a brother, yet who works hard to gain as much wealth as he can. Okay, stop right there. Okay, so Solomon is saying, like in that culture, okay, if you have a son, in that culture, you are going to build your business so that you can leave it to your son. Okay? That's how it worked back then, all right? But Solomon is going, you know what? This is like a guy, he doesn't have a son, he doesn't even have any kids, but he's going to kill himself just like he does. And he's saying, and yet he's going to work hard to gain as much wealth as he can. And so there's this little caveat in the middle of that, and it has to do with not being content. He's never going to be content because he's always going to be striving. Always going to be striving. And then the rest of verse 8 says this, but then he asks himself, and he goes, who am I working for? Why am I giving up so much pleasure now? It's also meaningless and depressing. Have you ever, okay, let me ask this. Have you ever met somebody that's still trying to prove something to someone that's dead? Have you ever met somebody like that? Yeah. Like, they're still trying to impress their dad that died 15 years ago. Right? See, when Solomon is saying something like this isn't far-fetched. Because I actually counsel with people, I've counseled with numerous people, that they're striving and they're chasing after the wind to prove something to somebody that's not even here on earth anymore. And it is ruining their life and destroying their future. That's what Solomon is talking about. I've talked with people that are in their 50s that are still trying to prove something. And Solomon is basically asking the question. This is what he's asking. He's saying, so why am I depriving myself of enjoyment by trying to prove something? I'm not even enjoying what I have. Because I'm chasing after the wind, and I'm chasing after something that is so nebulous, I will never, ever catch it. I'm chasing after that. So this kind of idea about this is carried on into the New Testament. I want you to go to the book of Luke, chapter 12, okay? Let's go to the book of Luke, chapter 12, okay? Listen to this story that Jesus tells. We're going to go to Luke chapter 12, starting in verse 16. Luke 12, starting in verse 16. Luke is in the New Testament. It's the third book in the New Testament. What was that, hon? 861 in the Bible that you have. All right? If you got one of those there that Robin had. Yes, Church Bible. Thank you, Robin. All right, so we're going to start in verse 16. Listen to what this says. It says, then he told them a story. He said, a rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, what should I do? I don't have room for all my crops. Then he said, I know, I'm going to tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And then I'll have room enough to store all my wheat and all my other goods. And then I'll sit back and say to myself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. So take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. And then verse 20, but God said to him, you fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for? Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth but not have a rich relationship with God. In our men's Bible study tonight, we were in the book of Mark. We were in chapter 8 in verse 35. It says, for you to be willing to give up your life for Jesus and for the good news, and then you will experience real life. And so this whole idea that we're talking about with this whole envy thing, what's driving this in us? What is it? What is that thing that drives this? It's in our DNA. What is it? Listen to this. Hear this. I will never experience God's purpose for my life while distracted by God's purpose in someone else's life. I will never experience God's purpose for my life while I'm distracted by God's purpose in somebody else's life. When you are focused on somebody else's life so much, you are being robbed from experiencing God's purpose in your life. Do you remember that guy named Peter? Here's a guy, lived with Jesus. He was with Jesus, denied Jesus 3 times, thought that he was disqualified from God's love, saw Jesus on the beach, and Jesus walked up to him, asked him, do you love me, Peter? Right? 3 times. And then at one point, Peter goes, yeah, but what about John? What about John? And Jesus looks at Peter intently, and he goes, I'm not concerned about John. What I want to know is, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? That's what Jesus is asking us tonight. All these people that you see on social media, all the stuff that you see on Instagram, all of that stuff, unfortunately, that's false. And if you're chasing after that, you're chasing after the wind. And Jesus is saying, do you want a heart of peace? Do you want a heart of peace? Do you want a heart of peace? I want a heart of peace. That's what I want in my life. Proverbs 14:30 again, remember it says, a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. All right? So how do you move from envy to thankfulness, okay? Listen to what this says in Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. It says this, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. And then he says this, tell God what you need. Thank him for all he's done. And then verse 7 starts off with this word, then. Okay, so you want to have peace in your life? Okay, Paul's telling us how to have peace. Tell God what you need. Thank him for what he's done. And then it says, then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and your minds as you live in Christ. That's the key. We have to have our hearts and our minds guarded from this envy thing. We need to have it guarded from that. How do you do that? Tell God what you need. Thank him for what you have. And then God says, peace that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus, right? All right, so here's my last saying. This is something I want you to memorize. It's this. When tempted to compare, stop to declare, envy, you are not the boss of me. I will not chase the wind. When tempted to compare, stop to declare, envy, you're not the boss of me. I will not chase after the wind. We're going to say this together. You ready? Here we go. When tempted to compare, stop to declare, envy, you're not the boss of me. I will stop, chase the wind. Okay, let me say it one more time. When tempted to compare, stop to declare, envy, you're not the boss of me. I will not chase the wind. May that become true of us. Because I don't know about you, I want to live a life full of peace. I don't want to chase after the wind. It's exhausting. All right, we're going to pray. Jesus, oh, forgive me for those times when I've chased after the wind. I have lost sight of your provision and your protection in my life. Teach me to not chase after the wind. I pray that I would declare it over and over and over again. Envy, you are not the boss of me. And may I have a rich relationship with God. Pray that you would be our provision, our protection this coming week. Teach us how to be content. We love you, Jesus. In the authority of your name we pray. Amen. All right, if you guys brought an offering, make sure you put it in the joy box in the back. And we'll see you next week.